Welcome to the AFROVO YouTube channel. Let's get straight into it. Australia's federal budget was officially released on May 12, 2026. And if you are an international student, whether you are planning to study in Australia or you are already there, several important changes and trends could affect you directly. So let's start with one of the biggest topics in this year's budget discussion: falling net overseas migration. Migration has become a major political issue across Australia. Rising housing costs, rental shortages, and ongoing cost of living pressures have pushed immigration numbers into the center of national debate. Many Australians believe migration levels have been too high, and political parties across the spectrum are now facing increasing pressure to bring those numbers down. But before going further, let's quickly clarify what net overseas migration actually means. Net overseas migration refers to the difference between the number of people arriving in Australia and the number leaving Australia over a specific period. In simple terms, arrivals minus departures equals net overseas migration. And according to the latest budget figures, Australia's migration numbers have already dropped significantly. The government says net overseas migration has fallen by roughly 45% compared with the peak level seen during the 2022-2023 period. Officials also expect the numbers to continue declining over the next several years. For the current 2025-2026 financial year, Australia is forecasting net overseas migration of around 295,000 people. For the 2025-2026 financial year, Australia is projecting net overseas migration at around 295,000 people. From 2027-2028 onward, that figure is expected to decline further to approximately 225,000 annually, with similar migration levels forecast in the years that follow, according to the latest federal budget projections. So when you look at the broader trend, migration numbers are clearly moving downward compared with previous years. Australia is now far removed from the extraordinary post-COVID migration surge seen during 2022-2023, when arrivals spiked sharply after international borders fully reopened. That period of exceptionally high migration has largely passed. Now, moving to the next major update, the permanent migration cap. The government has confirmed that the permanent migration program for the 2026-2027 financial year will remain unchanged at 185,000 places. That is exactly the same level maintained this year and the year before. So, at least for now, there has been no increase and no reduction in permanent migration places. And when you consider the broader political pressure around migration levels, many people in the migration sector see this as a relatively positive outcome. The government has faced growing calls to reduce permanent migration intake, particularly because of housing affordability concerns and infrastructure pressures. So the decision to maintain the intake at the same level suggests the government still sees skilled and permanent migration as important to Australia's long-term economic and workforce needs. Now, that is not even the biggest takeaway from this budget. The more significant update is how those 185,000 permanent migration places are being distributed. Around 70% of the total allocation will go to the skilled migration stream. In other words, the overwhelming majority of permanent residency places are being directed towards skilled migrants rather than family-based pathways. So, for people applying under skilled visa categories, this is an important signal from the government. Skilled migration remains the clear priority within Australia's long-term immigration strategy. The remaining places will continue to be allocated to the family stream, including partner and family-sponsored visas. But there is another major shift connected to these numbers. The government has also confirmed that greater priority will now be given to onshore applicants for permanent migration. When we say onshore, we mean people who are already living in Australia on another valid visa. Offshore refers to applicants applying from outside Australia. And according to the budget strategy, the government is increasingly favoring migrants who are already contributing inside Australia, whether through work, study, or regional participation, when allocating permanent residency places. In fact, the government is planning to allocate approximately 129,590 migration places specifically toward onshore applicants. That is a very significant number, and it sends a clear message about the direction Australia's migration system is moving in for the coming years. So when you break the numbers down, the message from the government becomes very clear. Out of the 185,000 permanent migration places available, close to 130,000 are expected to go to people who are already living in Australia. That strongly suggests that onshore applicants will continue receiving priority treatment when it comes to permanent residency pathways. And importantly, this approach applies across both the skilled migration stream and the family migration stream. For people already studying, working, or living in Australia, this is potentially very positive news because it indicates the government is placing greater value on applicants who are already contributing to the Australian economy and community. Now, moving to the next major point from the budget, the increasing focus on highly skilled migrants. As mentioned earlier, while a large portion of permanent migration places will go to onshore applicants, the remaining places allocated to offshore applicants are expected to be targeted very strategically. The government has made it clear that priority will be given to highly skilled migrants who can help fill Australia's critical workforce shortages. Australia is still facing major skill gaps across several industries, and the migration program is increasingly being used as a tool to address those shortages directly. In particular, the government highlighted construction and electrical trades as key priority sectors for offshore migration. So if you work in areas such as construction, electrical trades, infrastructure, or related technical industries, this could be a very important opportunity for you moving forward. These are exactly the types of occupations Australia is actively trying to attract under its current migration strategy. Another major announcement in the budget is the government's investment into faster skills assessments. Australia is allocating approximately $85.2 million to improve and speed up the skills assessment process for skilled migration applicants. And this is a very important development because for many skilled visas, obtaining a positive skills assessment is one of the most critical and time-consuming parts of the application process. For example, applicants in professions such as accounting, engineering, healthcare, trades, and IT usually need their qualifications and work experience formally assessed by an approved assessing authority before they can apply for permanent residency or certain skilled visas. The government says this additional funding is intended to significantly reduce assessment waiting times, potentially making the process up to 6 months faster than current timeframes in some occupations. That is extremely positive news for future skilled migrants, because long assessment delays have been a major bottleneck in the migration system for years. According to the government's projections, these faster assessment systems could help bring an additional 4,000 tradespeople into the Australian workforce every year. Now, let's move to student visas, because there is another major investment happening there as well. The Australian government has announced around $19.8 million in funding aimed at strengthening student visa integrity measures. In practical terms, this means the government plans to increase scrutiny and compliance checks to reduce fraud, misuse, and non-genuine applications within the student visa system. And importantly, these integrity measures will apply to both offshore applicants and students already inside Australia, applying onshore. So while Australia continues welcoming international students, the message from the government is very clear. Genuine students remain welcome, but the system is becoming much stricter when it comes to fraudulent documents, non-genuine study intentions, and visa misuse. So if you are an international student, you should expect stricter scrutiny on student visa applications moving forward. Applicants may now be asked to provide more supporting documents, more detailed financial evidence, and clearer explanations about their study plans and future intentions. And most importantly, the government is placing much stronger emphasis on testing whether applicants are genuinely intending to study in Australia. The genuine student requirement is already becoming one of the most heavily examined parts of student visa applications, both for offshore and onshore applicants. Overall, the government says the goal is to reduce fraud, strengthen visa integrity, and improve the overall quality and reputation of Australia's international education sector. Now, let's move to another very important update: changes to the skilled migration points test. As many people already know, Australia's points-tested migration system applies to visa subclasses such as the subclass 189 skilled independent visa, subclass 190 state-nominated visa, and subclass 491 regional skilled visa. For these visas, applicants must reach a minimum points threshold in order to be eligible, and invitations are usually issued to the highest-ranking candidates first. Points are currently awarded based on factors such as age, English language ability, educational qualifications, skilled work experience, Australian study, partner skills, regional study, and other bonus factors. Now, according to the latest federal budget papers, the government is preparing to introduce a revised points test system. At this stage, the government has not yet confirmed exactly how the new points allocations will work or which criteria will receive greater weighting. However, officials have confirmed that consultation papers are expected to be released around June 2026, which should provide more detail about the proposed reforms. And this could become one of the biggest skilled migration changes in years, because adjustments to the points test can dramatically affect which applicants become competitive for permanent residency invitations. So next month, and the expected implementation of this new point system will be by December 2026. So we can expect to know more about it later during the year, but it is expected to be implemented by December 2026. And in the budget papers, it was also mentioned that there will be transitional arrangement for those people who have already received their invites. So you won't be affected with the new point test if you have already received the invite. And it was also mentioned when it comes to this points test that the focus will be on young, educated, and highly skilled people. So that's a pretty strong message we have got from these budget papers regarding this new points test. Now, it's important to note that none of these changes have been implemented right away. The process is usually that this has to be passed through the Parliament, and then these things will be implemented. Now, there are a few things that we didn't hear about in this year's budget regarding international education. First one is regarding the fee. Usually at the start of a new financial year, 1st of July each year, we get to know about the new fee for student visas and temporary graduate visas. But we didn't hear any news regarding that. Although it's important to mention that currently, student visa fee for Australia, which is around $2,000, is one of the highest fee in the world. And just on 1st of March 2026, the temporary graduate visa fee was doubled overnight, from $2,300 to $4,600. But you never know, there might be some further increase from the 1st of July. But there was no mention about that in the budget papers. The second thing we didn't hear about is regarding the number of international students who are expected to be studying in the year 2026. As some of you know that there is a national planning level for international students. Each year, government release certain numbers. So the previous year's number were 270,000 students. This year is 295,000 students. But we don't know about the next year numbers as yet. And there was no information regarding that in the budget papers. And apart from the things that I just mentioned earlier, there were no other major updates for international education. Will they introduce something later on? Who knows? Now, based on this budget, here are key takeaways for international students who are planning to study in Australia or currently studying here. So first thing first, make sure that your visa applications are top-notch. Whether you're applying for student visa offshore or you are applying one from onshore, or you're applying for any other visa, you need to make sure that your applications are top-notch. And it's so important for you to plan and strategize for your student visa and other visa applications with your migration agents, especially if you're using one. And even if you don't use one, it's still important and critical for you to plan and strategize carefully. Make sure all the application forms are filled correctly. Make sure to provide all the documents that they need, and consider the timing of your applications as well. And timing is going to be critical for some of you, especially those students who are planning to apply for their permanent residency. Time might be ticking for you, as new points test is going to be introduced later in the year. You need to plan and strategize for that as soon as you can. And in the long run, think about skills and employability as well, as Australia needs people with skills and people who are educated. So don't just focus on making some quick bucks or dollars. Try to focus on getting skills that can actually be useful for getting jobs later on. And that is one of the key takeaway from this year's budget from the government.
I hope you found this update helpful and informative. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comment section below. I'll do my best to respond based on the information and knowledge available to me. Just remember, I'm not a registered migration agent, so this content should not be taken as personal migration advice. For guidance specific to your situation, it's always best to speak directly with a licensed migration professional in Australia. And if you are an international student planning to study in Australia, make sure to check out our free Overseas Student Guide, available on our website. It contains more than 200 pages of useful information, designed to help you better understand student life, visa planning, accommodation, work rights, and studying in Australia overall. You'll also find additional helpful resources and source links in the description below, including the official updates and reports referenced in this video. As always, thank you for watching, thank you for supporting the channel, and I'll see you in the next one.